Hey, Remy, to record this session.
Hello.
Hi,
Hello.
Peggy.
Hello.
Hello. Let's see. Seem to get on okay.
Well, just so you know, was having some connectivity issues earlier today. Things seem fine now, but if I disappear, you'll just have to do the whole presentation. So
Hey, if I disappear, since I've been seeming to having trouble with Zoom more than you. I'm gonna get a pen. Brian, you do your half of the presentation, then we'll stop and I'll share my screen, just so hopefully we won't have that problem again.
yeah, I'm going to present it. I'm not going to present it exactly as I did the other night, but
Yeah.
I'll make some comments on.
Yeah, we'll make it shorter. I don't expect we're.
Well,
gonna-
not only that, I think that there are some things that we can use this presentation to sort of point out things messages that we can all hit. So I'm actually going to talk more about the messaging.
Okay.
Everybody in the commission has seen my slides. So,
Do you think everybody did?
well, they're all old slides.
Oh.
They're all
oh,
stuff in the
right,
reports and
right,
stuff.
Right, I see what you mean. Yeah. Yeah. I can't believe this is your last meeting. Oh, ooh.
Well, you know, I was actually cheated out of 6, so I didn't ask for 6 more at the back end, but
Yeah, that's right. I mean, so you've been chairman for a year and a half?
2.
2, that's what I thought. Was I vice chair with you from the beginning? That's right. I couldn't remember. Hadn't it been fun?
But I wasn't notified of my joining for 6 months, so I missed the first 6 meetings.
Yeah.
I'm not asking for 6 on the back end, don't worry.
Hi, Vicky. We had Mark, so I think we only need 6 because there are only 11 without Jacqueline and the arborist. Maybe we'll hear some good news tonight about a new arborist. Poor Rianne, Chris is out for, I guess, on vacation for 2 weeks.
Oh, no.
He's going to be even busier.
So he's doing 4 jobs now?
I think, yeah. His, the arborist, Chris's, and John Mann's. Maybe that's why he showed his face here a minute, or showed himself a minute ago and then left.
Well, I'm going to have some free time after tonight, Rian, so let me know if you need help.
Oh, I'm going to offer.
We're going to
Oh,
keep you
please
busy
do.
on our committee.
Please
Oh,
do.
there he is.
Yeah, I'll just have to close my window. Give me a
Okay.
second. There we go.
We said, Rian, you must be doing 4 jobs, yours, Chris, John Mann's, and the arborist.
Yeah, I don't know how I'm surviving, but I'm surviving.
Well,
I'm surviving.
Brian said he'd help you, sir.
Good.
His duties will be done tonight. Well, no, Brian, we've still got a month.
Actually, Rian, after tonight, I'm switching back to my cemetery
Oh, no.
committee job. So I won't bug you for a month or so. I have 4 years of backed up issues.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope we got some more people tonight. We only have 3 so far. I know Jody said he'd probably be late. I think he had another meeting. That's the only one I heard from.
We're actually at 9.
I only see, don't believe, okay.
We're at 9. Myself, yourself, Vicky, Tim, Jeff, the 2 Jeffs, the 2
Gotcha.
Marks, and Jean.
I was on the wrong, looking at the wrong gallery view. See, what am I going to do without you, Brian? So I think we have a quorum, so we'll get going. We don't have Mark Rylander. but-
Yes, he's here.
Oh, is he? Okay. Oh, I
He's
see.
just- He's just hiding behind the trees.
Yeah, yeah, there he is with his wonderful,
Page 2.
yeah, his wonderful tree picture. All right. Thank you, Mark, for condensing those notes, and I sent them out yesterday. Does anybody have any changes, revisions to the notes? Oh, Tim?
I'll just mention Chris Genzick's name may have a typo in it in one of the, I don't remember which page, but just out of honor for everything the city staff is doing, we'll try to get that right on the official version.
Okay. So if that's the only correction, do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Okay, Jeff, second. All right, all approve, raise your hand. All right, minutes approved. All right, Rian, we don't have Chris here tonight, so I guess you cover the next 4 items. Do you have the agenda there? Let's see, we can't hear you. You unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good. How's everybody doing?
Great.
Doing good?
Well,
That's good. So I'll just give a quick update just on a staffing level, and then I'll go into the agenda items. Sorry, I'm having some difficulty with my computer right now. I cannot pull up my notes. Okay, so we do have, I'll start with agenda items. We do have a signed offer letter from our candidate, Urban Forester. The Urban Forester candidate will be starting with the city of Charlottesville on April the 11th. The individual's name is Steve Gaines, a great gentleman. I think he'll be a great fit. One of the members, the chair, was on the hiring panel. So that was a great recommendation, great process, and I think he will be a great fit to assist the city as a whole, and also assist the tree commission as well. But he will be starting on April 11th with us. What I'll do is, once he's on board, I'll have a meeting with a few members, or just with the chair and the vice chair, to do an introduction with you guys to get to know each other. And then he'll be joining you for the next meeting. And that'll be, I believe, May, the first meeting in May. The first meeting in May. The other update is the planting of the trees. The new planting, again, it has been a challenge to do the tree planting. Again, I just don't know, and I'm have some notes for the new arbiter when he comes in, is how do we do a much more efficient and effective way of basically educating and informing the community, especially when we are doing tree plantings on a right of way, but it butts up to a owner's property. We had a lot of, I won't say issues, but a lot of misunderstanding between residents and our tree planting. So just a quick update. What we normally do is we'll go out and flag trees. I mean flag where trees are going to go, probably around about October of last year. And on the flag is just the proposed tree and a telephone number to the arbiter. So if the owner comes out, they'll look at it, they might call. So we did that, but there was still a lot of misinterpretation. Oh, I saw the flag, I thought it was utilities doing something or stuff like that. So I'm looking into improving that process as well. Because once we started moving in and putting the flag with the species, people started noticing it as what is this? I don't want a tree. I don't want to know who's going to be cleaning, raking the leaves and all those stuff. So I want to try to improve that system on the city side. Is how do we educate, number one, and how do we inform, especially the owners right now about that. If we get that part right, I think everybody would be somewhat okay. There was also a lot of folks that wanted a different species of tree. I don't want evergreens. I want this. I want dogwood. I want, you understand? So also, trying to get the message out, maybe having a press release or a door tag, hanging a door tag, especially when we get to the owner's property. Hey, please give us a call. These are the species that we are thinking that will be planted on the right of way. So we have a few systematic approaches that I think can be much easier, much easier. So the vendor, where we are with the vendor, had a good meeting with the vendor. Number one, he was finding out also a lot of problematic situations with residents. In the beginning, I asked him to see if he could just knock on the door every time he's going to dig or plant, knock on the door, talk to the residents. So he's been doing that. Yes, did he get some doors shut? Don't plant? Absolutely. And that's where he contacted me to say, no, this resident absolutely does not want to have a tree. So we just had to do some finding places to plant. But also, well, we're also looking at when do we stop doing this, right? Because if we have all residents, I don't want a tree in front of my house. Where's it going to go? So we need some type of enforcement or some type of backing to say is, unfortunately, this is a city right away, and if you do, move the tree. Obviously, there will be mitigation issues that we'll discuss with the resident, but if we really need to have a tree in that spot, we need to have some type of enforcement, probably working with NDS, probably zoning, to help us out. If they move the tree, they will get cited or some type of systematic approaches. So again, as of to date, we planted 132 trees. So that's good. That's in the ground. They are mulching it at the moment, putting gator bags on it at the present moment. We are still waiting on roughly around about 32 trees. The vendor is dogwood trees to get shipped in. And once you get that shipped in, he'll be going ahead to start putting those 32 trees in. And I know there's, and once he's done with that, he's projecting to be done by the end of next week. The end of next week. Any questions on that process?
Yeah, so just a couple of thoughts. One, I appreciate the issues you've been dealing with. Hold on.
Brian, we can't hear you. Brian's been having some
Can
connectivity.
you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you, Rihanna. I appreciate the issues and how you're thinking about addressing them. And it occurs to me, we don't have much institutional memory on this because we didn't plant any trees last year. I mean, we planted 23, but we never heard. In past years, Mike did come to us and say that occasionally there was an issue, or he would self-selectively say, well, I reconsidered and I actually didn't put a flag or whatever there. So we didn't confront the issue because he made a decision not to. But we did deal with this and he did ask for guidance. And I'm glad that you're thinking about this because we absolutely have to strike a balance between individuals and the community, especially after we just made a presentation last week to council saying there are really two things that the city can do. And one of them is plant trees. And the response to that presentation that I saw on Twitter and elsewhere was, why isn't the city planting more trees? It's just so simple, they should plant more trees. And so obviously, you know, we asked council for more money to plant 200 trees in the next fiscal year. So any policy that we can come up with that strikes that balance, but that always errs on the side of the community, because after all, that's what we're working towards. As far as citing people, some of you will recall that we did have a property owner that cut down a tree a few years ago and they were fined. And so I think that, you know, they were cited and they were fined. I don't know if they had to replace the tree. I can't remember. Peggy may remember, Mark Rylander. So I think it's important that the public also knows that if they oppose a tree and after working with us on it, they don't like the tree and they do some damage to the tree, we will notice and proper action will be taken. So thank you for dealing with those issues.
Thank you, Rian. Just a comment too. I think that we need to look at our priority list. And I appreciate all the difficulties you've had, particularly since you're not an urban forester and you've had to deal with a lot of issues. You didn't know tree species.
But I'm learning. I'm learning
Now
a
you
lot.
do. Now you do. But one thing we noticed, particularly as we looked at Venable, you know, they have the shaded tree and the hot tree. And we decided, you know, we really should, one of our priorities should be playgrounds. We don't want our children playing on playground equipment in the hot sun, plus the equipment gets so hot. So I think that's a place where we can assess our schools and our playgrounds throughout this year. And I bet we're going to find a lot of places. So I think, you know, we'll talk with the arborist again about priorities and how do we handle the situation. So thank you. Any other?
And also, I just want to add, it's on the commission too, to educate. So this came up in the presentation last week. Councilor McGill was talking about it would be good if property owners knew a little bit more about trees. How can we educate them? And so in terms of the commission, and I know Jean's very interested in this as well. So in terms of educating the community, one good thing would be, you know, would probably help your department do its work, is that if this just doesn't suddenly come out of nowhere for people, because we all do, we look at our property and we look out and there's a flagworm there, there's a stake, and we're like, what are people doing? So I think we also need to work on the education.
Yeah, and one good thing, Rian, when we were interviewing Steve, he was very positive about loving to work with people and educate them about trees. He worked with a lot of different groups in New Hampshire and I think other places, and he seemed passionate about that. So I think we can help him, you know, maybe, you know, us or him can go to neighborhood association meetings. We can do some of that to let people know about the value of trees. And so thank you. All right, Jean, or we can't hear you, Jean. Oh.
I always do that. I don't know. I'll learn when I'm 100, I guess. Anyway, I've been thinking that, yeah, if you work with neighborhood associations and you try to find those places on private property and on the street where to identify in advance and educate and identify in advance people who would actually like trees, would make it a lot easier, rather than just going in and saying, we need to put trees along the street. Because then you would have the neighborhood backing you and try to find some positive rewards rather than sticks for owners. So that if you have one owner who doesn't want a street tree in the right of way, maybe their neighbor would like one just inside their yard, and you could plant one there. I don't know how the city would look at that, but it seems to me it's a compromise situation rather than forcing trees on people.
Yeah, thank you. Right now, the city does not plant on private property, but
No, that's what I mean. It would have to be, some people are going out as scouts in neighborhoods and working with neighborhood associations, not necessarily the city,
yeah. No, that's a good idea. I
but
think
work
we-
together.
so it doesn't look like just a top-down program.
Right.
And now let's see, Mark had his hand up, but he looks like he's disappeared. Mark Rylander. Oh, there he is. Mark, you had your hand up? Maybe he's having trouble too. He looks a little stuck. All right, thank
No,
you.
wait, just let me talk if you get through, okay?
Okay,
Is anyone else having problems with an internet connection but me?
No.
No? So, okay, so I need to find something else. I may need to ask someone what happened in the last 5 minutes. I heard Rian's whole presentation. I missed part of Brian, part of Peggy, and I heard Jean.
well, I
Okay.
think you heard everybody.
I didn't hear all of Brian or your comments, Peggy, to this item. So just jot something down if you want it in the minutes.
Oh, that's right.
And I may sign off and sign in again to see if I can. I'm only like a foot away from my router, so I don't know what it is. And I have Ting. So
I just said that when we talked to the arborist about the issue of planting trees on public property, that we want to review our priorities too. I think we've learned that we don't want to have hot playground structures in parks and schools. And so that's going to be a priority, which will be easy because the schools won't, if they do complain, we won't plant there, but I think they will. So that was my comment, Brian. I can't remember.
I'll share it with Mark offline.
Okay, all right. Well, let's move on because Rian's got two others going to talk about the canopy study and the mall tree study.
Yep, so nothing major to report on the canopy study. As you know, where we are all with the canopy study, still working with a consultant for the final documentation. I believe we reached out to members, gave comments to Chris. We also reached out to not neighborhood development, but environmental department to have comments also on that, and that got sent off to the consultant, and he will be making comments on those comments. So I'm hoping to have something to you guys hopefully by the end of March, possibly April, because what we want to do once it is a ratified recommendation documentation, we want to post it on our website, so anybody and everybody will be able to look at it and view it. I'll document to make it public. So that's where we are with that. The mall tree study, thanks for the RFQ. I reviewed that. At the moment, I'm just trying to wait for the new arborists to come along, catch him up to speed, and then trying to see as a collective group what the direction we want to go into. Do we want to piggyback on the draft RFQ or IFB that you guys have been working on? Or do we want to make some changes to that and move that study forward? So that's where we are with those two items. And I only have one last topic if there's no other questions.
Any questions on those two items? Okay,
Yep. The other thing is I did mention, I know in the last subcommittee was the Zoom meetings. How many do we get? We only get 2. Reasons being is not because, it's because of the lack of staff time it takes to run this meeting. So it is 2. They're keeping it at 2. So that's where we are with that.
Okay, thank you, Rion.
Mhm.
All right, we'll move on to our annual presentation to City Council, which Brian and I did last Tuesday. And, well, there's Jody. Hi. Hi, Jody. Welcome. So we're going to show you all the slides, but we will shorten our talk. And hopefully it goes well. If you watched it last week, for some reason, Brian kept, when I started to talk, he kept advancing the slides. And for some reason, I couldn't see them. And I got a little impatient with Brian. But I hope it was all in good fun and we worked it out. So tonight, Brian's going to do his part, then I'm going to do my part. So we'll have a little pause, but we're just going to, again, I think it went really well. The City Council asked almost a half an hour of questions before. We've almost had no questions, maybe because it was late in the night sometime, but they seemed engaged. And I got a text from one of the City Council members saying the council was really impressed and staff is put on notice about your concerns. So that was very nice. So Brian's going to start.
Everyone see?
Yes.
So I don't think there are any parts of my presentation that the commission will not have seen, mostly because it draws from the slides or from the graphs that were in the written report, the fiscal year report. So again, as we explained to the council, especially for new councilors, this report that we delivered, even though it's coming a little late in the cycle, each year really has 3 things in it. This presentation, one is a summary of the previous year's fiscal year report, so FY21, sort of an update as to where we are in FY22, which will end July 31st, and also the asks for FY23 under the CIP. So that's the 3 things that this presentation does. I'm not going to go through each slide except to say just sort of the messaging here that I think is probably good for all of us to consider as commissioners, and also sort of the main points, the reasons why we wanted to stress. So for my part of the presentation, obviously there were many more graphs and charts that could have been presented, but they had seen them in the written report. It was also, even though we had more time than usual to make this presentation and to actually have a conversation, there's only so much time. And so you always go back and you think, well, I wish I had said this, I wish I had said that. The fact is that what we really wanted to hammer in the first part of the presentation, so that Peggy could come along and talk about what we were doing to deal with those issues and also what council and the city could do, were really 2 main points. And they're really the elephants in the room. One is tree canopy is declining, that decline is accelerating. And obviously we are still looking at 2018 data. So we wanted to impress upon council that where we stood today was in fact worse, inevitably worse than where we are as of 2018. And also, that the city needed to be addressing this, and the way to address it was to plant more trees. So committing more resources in terms of funds and also in terms of staff or whatever resources we need to meet our target and eventually exceed our target for planting. And secondly, the other big gorilla in the room is how to deal with the coming zoning code rewrite and what the commission was focused on there. Here, what we just did, as we always do, is sort of show where Richmond is and what their target is, but also thought it was important to pull out from the very language of the comprehensive plan, which Vicki had done for her committee, and we pulled it out and pulled out really the language in there, which is what the chapter in the goal, which is what the city's pledged itself to do, and also several of the sub-strategies specifically the ones dealing with the canopy, with streetscape and street planting, so generally road projects. And of course, the third point being, how do we make our code friendlier so that we can do better to sustain and enhance the tree canopy? There's our old friend, 660 acres. I did notice, since we have new counselors, I did notice a couple of eyebrows go up once again, even though they might have seen this before. One way to explain this is to people is that the total land area of the city is roughly 6,600 acres. We started at 50% in 2004. We're at 40% today. That means it's equivalent to yanking out 10% of the acreage of Charlottesville in that period. But really, that's where we believe we are. And I should point out that thanks to Paul Jose for doing this slide, and apologies to Albemarle County for swiping a little bit of their territory there. But again, this is a projection, and so we made it clear to council that, you know, we believe that it's likely there's another 5% loss, but we may be surprised pleasantly. It was only 3% when the next canopy study is done, or it may even be worse. And we did add the caveat, which staff has presented us, that we don't know really what the overall impact of removing ash trees will have on that number. Just to go back here for a minute, I hadn't really looked at the sub-strategies, or I had a long while back, but I'd forgotten that it is to protect and expand canopies citywide and at neighborhood level. So to be able to show that we are not doing that, neither citywide nor at neighborhood level, we say, this slide had been retitled at one point, it said it in nearly all neighborhoods, but the fact of the matter is it's still very generous to say in all but 2 neighborhoods, because those 2 neighborhoods where we didn't lose a tree canopy, Star Hill, which obviously already has a very low canopy, and the UVA 1 neighborhood is a 0%. So, you know, basically we can just say that pretty much every single neighborhood, no neighborhood made progress, and almost all but 2 went backwards. The important thing, I think, too, which we tried to stress, especially in the Q&A afterwards, is that there's a lot of data here, and that we know, commission knows, that staff and the commission will be digesting this over the life of this report, and it will drive the strategies, it will drive the requests for budgets, et cetera. There's no silver bullets. There's no, you know, one thing we can do. We can debate and perhaps disagree on what the mix of tools that we employ to do this. But one thing that is sort of foolish to overlook, and that is that it's a decline. And a declining trend is not a good trend. And I think that, you know, the Q&A that really came up, I think people gathered focused on it. Of course, the overlay of that, which we've all seen, and they've seen as well, next year's presentation, we'll have a more up-to-date city, I can't remember who did it, sustainability, we'll have something more for us. Just did pull this out quickly because obviously this shows, sorry about that. This shows the, you know, the hole we're digging ourselves out of. And it's a long-term hole. And I did stress here too as well that although it's counterintuitive to some people, perhaps not to those gathered this afternoon, we can plant at our goal, we can plant at 2 times our goal, we can plant at 10 times our goal, and we can still lose canopy. And we know that's a very simple formula. So it is plant, preserve, and protect. It's not one of them, it's not 2 of them, it's not 3 of them. I know you all know that, but I can say that I got comments after this presentation, the days after, and I read some of the social media commentary, and there's a notion that perhaps the tree commission is rather antiquarian and it is in favor of saving all the trees, and that really what we just need to do is not focus as much on that as opposed to other city goals, but we just need to plant more small trees. And if we plant lots and lots of small trees, someday we'll have a tree canopy again. Again, we know that, but I think in terms of messaging and anticipating, particularly going into the zoning code rewrite, I think it's important for the commission to be aware that that is out there, and that we're not unreasonable about the other demands and needs of the city that might impact trees. but that this needs to be a holistic approach. Planting alone is not enough. And we're not even doing that, although we're making great strides, as Brian said tonight, and we'll be planting more trees next year should council approve the CIP request. The second half of my presentation, and I retitle these slides, and I know for some people it's a little provocative, and there was some pushback on this, some social media and comments that I got, including comments from friends of mine that perhaps we were a little unfair here, especially on this last slide. But the fact of the matter is that we know that the code is not particularly friendly to trees at this point. And it's important, since we have been highlighting the continuing deterioration of the canopy on Garrett Street, it was important to go back, as Paul did for us a few years ago, started this, but to show them sort of the progression from year to year of how we will have managed, although we may make some strides to preserve some trees in future phases of the Friendship Court development, but how we will have managed through no villainy on anybody's part, and I stressed that in the presentation. Developers operating by code, city staff doing their best, working with the code we have. And at the end of the day, we can still end up with a progression, the loss of tree canopy. And we can debate the competing needs on the street, and the tree commission, is not, and Peggy stressed this very clearly in the Q&A, that the commission is not, this is not an either or situation. We understand that there are competing interests in the city. We feel the commission is being very reasonable in its approach in terms of the sort of the three-legged stool, plant, preserve, and protect, which can accommodate other needs, but that, in its sort of patience and understanding, and especially waiting through the pandemic and with the zoning code rewrite coming, that the commission believes that the time to act is now, which is why we sent an action memo to council, and that we really strongly believe that as the city gears back up, we have a fully staffed department, we have a fully staffed city government, that the commission will be very active in the process, as Peggy will speak to in a minute, especially for the zoning code rewrite. I think the last point I would say is that as much as the presentation that we made, and notwithstanding the little technical glitches, as I was advancing the slides, as Peggy said, she was having a Zoom issue and couldn't see it. I think even more important than the presentation, and clearly the message got through, was, and I don't know, we don't have an historian for the tree commission or for city council, but I venture to say that this was probably the first time that, number one, the commission has had as much time to address these issues. And two, I believe this is probably the first time that everybody who really should have been in on this conversation was in that room, or is in that Zoom room. All of city staff, from the acting city manager through the deputy city manager, through the relevant department heads, through the leadership of our own home department, Parks and Rec, and all councilors were there to hear this. And I think that for me was really the most important part of our presentation, that we were actually had that time to speak. So anyway, that's my piece, and I will shut this down and turn it over to Peggy.
All right. So let's see. Now, I guess I have to say share my screen first. Yeah. Okay. Okay, I said enter full screen and it didn't work. Let's see.
Slideshow.
I mean, I'm trying, just a minute. I guess I'll just do slideshow, yeah.
Yep.
All right, well, I'm back to, let's go through, start over again. See, I continue to have issues. Here we go. All right, so Brian was kind of the bad guy talking about the gloom and doom. So I came in to talk about what we can do and what city council can do. We talked about the things that basically are ongoing that we advise staff, council, and actually planning commission too. We engage with the public, like here at Venable at Arbor Day a number of years ago. We collaborate with other nonprofit groups. And we try to monitor the effects of development on our green infrastructure. And Brian kept talking about we're deforesting the city, which I think is what's happening, which is what is happening, as we know. So I talked about there are two main things that the Tree Commission is doing this year. One that's incredibly important, reviewing the zoning ordinance. I think it's 15 or 20 years since it's been looked at. And some of our main objectives were to increase requirements for new trees, strengthen and enforce tree protection during construction, establish consequences for public trees damage, and review site plan application. You can see those are the 8 trees that were cut down at Apex Plaza. Beautiful big oaks. And as we talked about before, if this had happened in Richmond, that developer would be having to pay in tens of thousands of dollars if he was allowed to cut down these public trees. Michael Payne, one of the counselors, said he was very intrigued with that requirement. So that's good. Okay. The other project we're doing this year is Relief Seaville, and I went through that pretty quickly. Our main things are plant trees, preserve trees, and educate about trees and nature in the city. And we talked about we're concentrating on 10th and Page, which has 18% canopy, few places to plant public trees, and the health consequences we haven't documented yet, but I'm sure they're there. We know that most families, over 50% of the families in 10th and Page, pay more than 10% of their income for energy costs. The average in the city is 2%. So this is a collaboration between Relief, the Tree Commission, and the tree stewards. So the educate, the third thing we're doing, and we'll talk about this a little more, we're going to have an event at CHS to introduce teens to jobs in the green industry. We're developing with the City of Promise teen ambassadors, which will help in the fall to go out and knock on doors in 10th and Page and talk about the value of trees, and working with a volunteer from the tree stewards or the Tree Commission, and try to convince them to plant trees. We've been making presentations to elementary schools, Venable, and we hope to do it at City of Promise and Lugo McGinnis too. So I showed him just a few slides of the presentation that we gave to Venable, and this is where the Zoom broke down when I kept saying, Brian, advance the slide, please. So why are trees important to you? We showed them the difference of the temperature on the playgrounds. This playground has no shade. We're going to work, Rian, this is something we need to work on. There is a way to get trees in there. When the new urban forester comes, we'll talk about it. It was a good idea that Mike brought up. But anyway, this is 102 degrees on the same day. And then the shaded playground was 82 degrees. And of course, nobody was playing on the hot playground. So we just showed them a few slides. We thought this was fun because all the kids loved it. Trees help animals by giving them a home. And somebody said this was photoshopped. It's not. it's trees. I think in Morocco, you can see there's little vegetation on the ground. They have to climb trees, or how are they going to live and eat all the leaves? So we talked about who Relief is and the partnership. Then we talked about, I think, what council can do for trees. So we went through, there are about 4 different things. Of course, they can continue to fund our CIP requests for not only tree planting, but the ash trees. And we talked about the problem with the ash trees. The Planning Commission has kept this in the CIP. As far as I know, it's still there. And then we talked about the zoning ordinance and we showed them this picture on West Main Street where the setback was eliminated. And you can see along that whole street, it's the only building that doesn't have trees on West Main Street. The question came up, if we eliminate if we have setbacks, is that going to decrease building or density? But we know that they're big buildings along West Main Street and they're trees, they can coexist. Look at Mark's picture when he comes back on. Talk about trees existing right next to trees, right next to big buildings. So increase requirements for new trees, better protect trees during construction, provide incentives or require compensation for damaged trees. And try to protect our natural resources. Maybe new large developments can be put on parking lots or other vacant land. So we talked about, the problem that we've had of a little cooperation between the city staff. And we told them we understand this has been a tough 4 years. As Rian will point out, every single department head is new except for one. They're starting from ground up, trying to build the city back together. So we're not blaming anybody, but we hope from this going forward, we'll have better. We talked about creating the position of a natural resource manager that can really protect not only trees, but all our natural resources, particularly as we go through site planning review. So we talked about enhancing the charge of the tree commission. So we talked about particularly when they're very important, large site plans that we could have input. It was really nice to hear the director of NDS. He seemed to think it was unfortunate that 4 trees are coming down. He seemed to guarantee us that they're going to try as many trees going forward in the next 2 phases. So I think we need to hold him to that and make sure we review these site plans. Again, maybe there's a way to encourage departments to work together by having a public works person attend our meetings. And over the long term, that perhaps we could expand our charge to look at not just trees, but Natural Resource Commission. I think on social media, we got a little bit of criticism about we're only interested in trees. Just one other thing, we talked about, just as Brian did, that the Tree Commission certainly wants to have affordable housing and much better public housing. But we said it's not an either or, you can have both. And in fact, I spent an hour last night talking to one of our members of the community who's very much behind the housing. And we had a good time. And we came to the conclusion at the end of an hour that we need to work together, that we can have both. We can make healthy neighborhoods and have density. So everyone might have to compromise, but we can do both. So again, we just ended again showing them the sad state of affairs, but we think there's hope. So, so that was that. Are there any questions? Thank you, Jody. And Jody, looking back at our bylaws, they say explicitly advise and not advise and consent, but advise staff, city council, and planning commission. And we've never given this presentation to the planning commission. So I was going to ask Rian to ask the head of the planning commission if we could do it.
I think that's a great idea. I love that slide of the standard and the loss across from each other. God, it is so telling. Yes, they need to see that, especially. They need to know the issue of creating setbacks that don't allow enough room for utilities and trees.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Great. Yeah, I'll mention that at my next when I give this report at the next planning commission meeting.
Great. Well, I see we're running over our time a little bit. I'm sorry, we talked too much, Brian. We just had a lot of fun.
Can I just add to this, since we're all gathered here? I mean, if you know members of the council or city, I mean, I don't know if this presentation, I've lost track, if it was put on our website or if it was sent out to the commission entirely, but
Oh, I have to do that.
share it, to
Sorry.
share it,
Yeah.
to take these points, to have these conversations. Let's not lose the momentum that we really begin, we really are built on at that meeting last week, because there was definitely interest. Again, not every counselor is going to agree on all of our recommendations, but there's enough interest there. And I think the bottom line is that we want affordable housing, we want more housing, we want denser housing, we want equity, we want justice, we want livability in this city, and livability implies also health. And so I think that, when you make this message, it's like beating a dead horse, because we say that ourselves, but it's important to not lose sight of that when you're having these conversations, because it's not an either or. And when somebody says, well, the tree commission is really focused on trees, perhaps at the exclusion of other things, you know, at the end of the day, we are the tree commission. We're the only ones who are going to advocate most forcefully for trees.
Here, here.
Others will advocate for their important things, and we agree with those things, but we cannot shy away from taking that to the public and say, yes, we're passionate about trees, and we're the stewards of trees, working with Parks and Rec. We are the stewards of trees, and to just not lose sight of that. I think that's a critical part of the message.
Yeah, Brian, I think that's a really important thing to bring up because it's where that dialogue comes together, where we're, you know, trees, and there's community activists in the city and others who are, you know, pro denser developments and, you know, public housing, which we are also. But if we each have a position, then there is a meeting point somewhere in the middle where that dialogue happens. And you say, well, this could happen and this could happen. And therefore we have a better product at the end of the day versus one position overriding all others. I think that dialogue is a really important aspect of it. And that's what we need to engage in and to have our, you know, have our point, have our role in that.
Jean, just a second. I want to ask Rian, do we have Irene Peterson? Is she going to give a presentation? Rian, I don't see her here. She probably isn't.
She was, I believe there was communication that the director had an invite for April. So I think they moved
okay.
it to April.
Okay, well, that's fine. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're actually not behind. So Jean, I'm sorry. I just wanted to.
No, I was just wondering, I was watching some videos by Tim Wheatley of UVA. And I mean, it's mind-boggling because all of his images were of highly dense cities around the world. And they were biophilic developments in the heart of these dense cities. Is there some way we can get the city council and the planning commission watching, get him to make a presentation to officials in Charlottesville who are talking about just to open their imaginations to what you can do and overcome some of these cognitive blocks that they have because they've never experienced a biophilic city before?
That's a good idea. Well, I think, you know, as we do the zoning ordinance, maybe we can figure out some way to have our officials see that. So we'll keep that in mind. We'll put it on our to-do list, Jeff. So, all right. Thank you, Jean. That's a good point. So I think we'll move on. So we are on time here. So we have committee reports. The first one is the education and advocacy, and Mark, and then I'm going to talk a little bit too. Mark, are you there?
I am here. I'm on my phone while my computer is installing like a month's worth of updates, which I think was the problem I was having earlier.
Okay.
We've talked a little bit, our small committee, about the upcoming public hearing on the CIP funding, March 21st or 22nd. I just need to find out exactly date and time there, and I'm planning to speak at that hearing, and would like to actually prepare my comments and share them with at least Peggy and Jeff and Brian, a core group of the tree commission, maybe just share them to the whole commission in advance. Because I think that having something that's written that accompanies the comments can be really powerful. So in that presentation, it's really to drive home the fact that our 200 trees per year goal is barely keeping pace, using some of the information from the slides we just saw, basically that the 100,000 that we're asking for tree planting is just to some extent treading water, and that it just should be approved, on spec. I have some thoughts about how to how to frame that. And then there's the emerald ash borer amount, which I'm sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head if it's because I don't have these screens up that I had earlier. Is it 50 or 150? What are we saying?
105, Mark.
105, right? Got that flipped. So I think it's an opportunity to remind, sort of noting that it wasn't sort of front and center on this recent presentation to council, but it should be something that is just seen as a basic infrastructure maintenance request that's related to public safety. And I think figuring out how to word that carefully without having to, put too fine a point on it would be a good goal. Let's see. We also have talked about, we've got a request to possibly have the tree commission join a community organization that has a diverse group of stakeholders, and we wanted to look into that, sort of what it means to be an advisory group to council, but also be part of a group that is seen as an active advocate for other causes. I have a personal take on that, and Peggy, I don't know if you want to have that be a conversation in this meeting, but that's just something that the education committee is dealing with.
Yeah, let's wait till next meeting. We have some more information. It's a Seville 100. We haven't sent out any information about that yet. So I think that's going to be on the April agenda.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So that's basically it, in addition to just our ongoing tracking of communications.
Thank you, Mark. All right. Any questions from Mark to Mark? All right. So I'll just talk about a little bit about what Relief is doing. We're going to have a event. It's not actually going to be on Arbor Day. It has to be on a Thursday. It'll be on April 21st at CHS. And the point, it's going to be called an environmental career fair. And we're going to be introducing teens to jobs in the green industry. We're working with 2 teachers there, Peter Davis, who is the urban farming teacher, and Aaron Gibner, who is environmental science teacher. And it'll just be an hour there's a break. They have a break time on Thursdays from 1 to 2, but we'll have setup time before that. Anyway, we're inviting about 15 to 20 different vendors from landscape architects, including Jeff here and Paul Josie, and tree care industry, landscaping industry, solar panels, bunch of others. We're going to make it fun for the kids. We're going to have food, music, no dancing, but we're going to have a scavenger hunt. Not a scavenger hunt, but some way to make it fun, to make sure they go around to the different vendors. It'll be outside. Rain date will be the following Thursday. We can't invite the whole 1,200 kids, but we're concentrating on the science children and students. And of course, a lot of students will be taking some kind of science class. So, so that's going to be fun. And Lucy Hartlett, who used to work with Rian, who's a wonderful woman, she is actually coordinating for us and putting together, because she was a park programmer. I'm sure Rian didn't like the fact she left. And so she is used to putting this kind of event together. So it's great.
Where is it again, Peggy?
It's going to be at Charlottesville High School.
Okay, thank you.
This is the way we're getting to the teenagers about the importance of trees and the environment. And so we think it'll be fun. It was done in Richmond. The Nature Conservancy is, of course, helping us here, but the Chesapeake Bay Foundation did a similar thing in Richmond, and it was great success. So,
and the date?
It's April 21st, 1 to 2. Rain date is the next Thursday, which is April 28th, 1 to 2, on a Thursday. So we'll let you all know, we could use some volunteers to help set up, give out popcorn, whatever. All right, the next thing I'm going to show you are relief handout. Let's see, what do I have to do that first? Wait a minute. Always up, just lost it. See, I have trouble here. Let me, I'm gonna have to bring it up again, sorry. And just give me a few more minutes. If not, if I'm having trouble, then we'll go ahead and we'll come back to me. Okay. You're gonna have to stay here, Brian, because I don't know how to do this Zoom thing very well. So let's see. So this is the digital. It's basically a little booklet, but this is the digital rendition. So of course we have our logo and our mission. We're going to make the big fat claim that trees save lives. Our mission is to protect the health and well-being of our low canopy neighborhoods from the heat impacts of climate change. So I think you saw this just before, how we'll do it: plant, preserve, educate. Then who we are: Tree Commission, Tree Stewards, Nature Conservancy, City of Promise, Van Yers Tree Company. So we said, imagine that every neighborhood looked like this: clean air, shade trees, vibrant green spaces. Instead, we know the reality in some Charlottesville neighborhoods is quite different. I don't need to take you through all these statistics. We've just done it. But we know we now have 12 out of 19 neighborhoods of below 40% canopy. We're going to prioritize planting on private property, and 10th and Page is our first neighborhood. So again, we're focusing on 10th and Page, which has a low tree canopy. And we talked about, we're educating, giving grants to teachers, events for teens. And I won't go through that, but this is, let's relieve Seville together. Leaves save lives, every kid outdoors, a tree for every yard is good for everyone. Focus on nature. So that's us. That's what we're doing. That's the handout. So any questions about the Arbor Day event or anything that Mark said? Yeah, Jean?
Can we get a copy of what you just showed? Can you send us a
Yeah.
link? Or
I will. We've got a couple mistakes on it. You know, every time you look at something, there's something wrong. So let me just get it fixed, and I'll send it to you. Okay, so now let's.
Where was that park? Because I want to go there. Where was that?
I know, I'm afraid we have to use stock photos.
Yeah.
And we argued a lot about that one because it might look more like New York, but we tried to find a great photo of kids in a neighborhood in Charlottesville. We'll get that sometime. I think it was in, I'm not sure where it is.
No, I mean, there are places like that. You can see them in Europe and elsewhere. I mean, there are places where they actually have lots of trees.
Around athletic fields.
Yes.
Yes. And we also wanted to appeal to teenagers. We're not just little kids, but teenagers. So that we thought would appeal a little bit more to the older kids. So let's see, Arbor Day, Jeff.
So we are very excited, Rian, to have an urban forester coming on board. And it sounds like their tenure could start in a timely fashion to make it possible for them to participate in Arbor Day. And it sounds like from what Peggy has said, Steve is very interested in that public outreach. So I think making sure we're communicating with him about messaging and how we can help bring him on board and help sort of prop him up, and the city and the city's role in increasing our urban canopy. I think we really do want to play a role in that. CATS already has some ideas about how they are going to help celebrate Arbor Day, and that includes I think commemorating an American elm that is at Sojourners Church, which is at the corner of Monticello and Elliott. And so that is already in the works. I think having some tree commission attendance at that event would be important. There are a couple things that we can do relative to that in terms of getting a Tree City USA banner that I believe is in Chris Gensick's possession somewhere in the city. And then anything else that has been used on other Arbor Days that could sort of help facilitate the kind of the image of Arbor Day. And then one other thing.
Jeff, what's the date and time of the CATS event?
I have not heard the time specifically, but Arbor Day is the 29th of April.
So it is
Friday.
going to be on 29th.
Mark, have you heard anything specific from Mark's nodding? So I think he's been the one who's been in touch with Robin. And that's, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And one other thing, Jody, relative to what CATS is doing is I think they would like to try and get that elm on the tree conservation ordinance. So what we did for the Garrett Street Oaks, they would do for that American elm, and get it sort of fast tracked if possible, so that by Arbor Day, it was already sort of saved.
I don't.
Peggy thinks that's maybe a little bit
No.
too ambitious.
I doubt.
Yeah, I doubt it.
Yeah, I
Um,
doubt it. We have-
That's a tree on private property too, correct? That's actually the church property?
that's a church, but
Is
they
it church
can
property?
nominate it. The church can.
Yes, I
nominate it.
know, but they would probably also want to consider, as all private property owners, the restrictions placed on the tree. So I
Right.
think it's a little more complicated for
Yeah,
private.
but
property.
getting it approved by council, I think before Arbor Day probably be pretty difficult.
All right, we'll feed that back to Mark, or I will.
We
feed that
can
back to
hope.
Robin. But we can hope.
But I think it would be nice. The other thing I think is, Jeff, I think we can only do it twice a year. So we want to do, there are other trees out there that we've been holding back.
Okay. Well, we wouldn't necessarily have to do that. Maybe that's more informing commission that the tree stewards would like to do that with Sojourners Church for that American elm.
Well,
So
I
maybe
think
we say,
it has
you
to
know,
come, yeah, it has to come to us though, Jeff. So,
Okay.
and the arborist has to look at it and it's a little more complicated.
Okay. Good to know. And then one other thing that we have briefly talked about and have not fully defined is that the idea of actually planting a tree on Arbor Day. And we have not done this in the recent past, but it can be a very photogenic thing to do. And Arbor Day is a lot about impressions and sort of getting an idea out there to the larger public about what the city is doing and what the city can be doing, et cetera. So if we could procure a tree, and that seems like that is possible. We have some offers for a tree, for procuring a tree and having it dug prior to that date so that it hasn't already leafed out, and we're ensuring that it, you know, its survival is successful. But finding a location for it, and I think one suggestion is that we could potentially do that at Clark. It's not that far from Sojourner, so the two events could be, you know, closely coincident in time. Potentially, people could just walk up the street to that area, but that would require some coordination with Rian and the urban forester about a location at Clark where that could happen, and then of course a species. So there's a little bit more legwork to do there, but I think if people are on board with that idea, that's something that we would like to continue to pursue.
We may recall that last year it was a front page story for the Daily Progress, and just as a note, Jeff, if you were asked to, if anyone's asked to make some comments to the paper on behalf of the Tree Commission, I would have sort of a half-page document to hand them, since they made 3 factual errors in 1 sentence for my quote.
Love
But
it.
that's,
Thank you.
that's okay, because the tree's no longer there, so.
Yeah, and then the tree fell down, so
The tree fell, so.
if we go
You're
to
off the
Clark,
hook.
get far away from the tree.
Great. Well, we hope to do a press release for that would then also work with the city. And I see that Jean's hand is up, but I think we would want to do something that, per your comment, Mark, to make sure that there's a press release of some sort relative to a planting like that. The intention behind the planting, species, location, and touch on some of the other bullet points we've had tonight, already talked about.
Jean, did you have a comment?
Yeah, sorry, my husband was just texting me that he's locked out. Anyway, I was wondering, on Arbor Day, if we do want to, as Jeff mentioned, start publicizing some of the things the commission's doing, what's up with relief? That is, if we tried at least to promote to the neighborhood that that new tree is going to be planted in, I think, is that Belmont, where that would be, where you're talking about? And Belmont would be a good neighborhood to try to go out and get more property owners to want to volunteer to get trees. Do we publicize to other neighborhoods the relief program when the relief program might not get to them in 10 years? I don't understand how we're going to juggle that.
Yeah, just one response to one of your comments. In Belmont, we've actually working very closely with CATS. A number of years ago, we did twice go into those neighborhoods and plant trees. I mean, it was a big effort, you know, knocking on doors. And I can't remember exactly. Mark, Z, do you know how many trees we actually planted? Was it 40 or 60? I can't remember.
I think there were slightly over 20 both years.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but it's Belmont is still down at 27%. And I walk there almost every week and through the neighborhoods, and I see lots of places where you could put trees which would shade the sidewalk, but would be on private property. So there's still areas there that could work. I just don't know about publicizing it.
Yeah. Well, relief.
Publicizing relief. I mean, we could just publicize the benefits of trees in general and not mention relief, and give them someone to contact who could then maybe work with the homeowner, CATS, and the neighborhood.
Yeah. And well, relief right now is obviously we're concentrating on the really low canopy neighborhoods. And we're also trying to be careful. We're doing a lot of education because we don't want this to be a top-down program, look like a government program. We really want it to be slowly and come from the bottom up. And CATS has already planted about 14 trees there. So that's, you know, so we're sort of, you know, we're building up so we can do more neighborhoods, but we're concentrating on the really low canopy neighborhoods right now. But so
Don't forget about your husband, Jean.
Yeah, I'm going to go rescue him.
yeah. Thank you, Jody.
He's dedicated.
Okay. Well, the third, we're going to have Vicky talk, and I know I want to mention that I sent out in the packet. Vicky did a great job of going through the whole comprehensive plan and marking down where we talked about trees and environment and urban ecology and whatnot. I thought that was a great document. And I think it's something that gives us a lot, as Brian has talked about, a lot of legs to stand on when we talk about what the city should be doing about the nature and trees. I was a little disappointed that the NDS director, of course, who's very new, said that he thought that within his department, he could handle looking at site plans and protect trees and protect nature. But as you know, those of us who have been on the tree commission for 5 or 6 years, that's been pretty frustrating for us because we've seen trees come down that we hope weren't going to come down. We've seen wrong trees planted. We've seen no trees protected during construction. So I think NDS has a long way to go. And but I think James is very hopeful, and I think he's going to be a great leader. That's the director of NDS. But I think, Vicky, you've given us a great leg to stand on. And when we meet with him next time, we can, we'll have a lot to talk to him about.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And to give James credit, he just got here.
Yeah.
He's coming to a department that has not had, that's been somewhat disorganized. and have lost a lot of staff. And so he's building up. And I've been very impressed with his experience, his leadership, and his ability to organize. So I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and hope, or I trust that he is working to improve things at the review process in NDS. But I agree, we need to let him know about the issues we've had in the past, so he knows what to correct.
Yes. And I didn't mean to criticize him, because I think he was very good in reaction to Garrett Street. He was very good about the zoning ordinance. He's really looking forward to us. He has a lot of ideas of his own. I think he's going to be a strong leader. I'm really looking forward to that. But I think we do just need to give him a little bit of history. But I agree with you completely, Jody. So Vicki, I didn't mean to take up all your time.
No, that's fine. I'm done.
No, you're not.
Okay. Well, the Codes and Practices Committee met on February 16th. And besides the 3 official members of the committee, Tim, Jeff P., and me, we have 3 other people who are going to help us. Brian has agreed to continue helping the committee even after he's not on the commission. We also have Paul Josie is going to help, and Keith Pritchard, who is an arborist in Nelson County. So, and it looks like there's a lot of knowledge in that group, and we had a good conversation about what we want to accomplish. We talked about whether to, give general ideas for the people drafting the zoning code, or to be more specific, and decided on a combination of both, to have 4 general goals that will tell them we want to see. And Peggy already listed those: the site plan review, protection of trees during construction, enforcement penalties, and just increasing requirements, canopy requirements for planting. Tim is still going to be our liaison with Seville Plants Together, and they happen to be having a meeting tomorrow. And the public is invited to attend. So if you want to watch that meeting, you can go on the city website and register for that. So hopefully after that meeting, we'll have a clearer idea of when and how to provide our input. In the meantime, we're reviewing the zoning code and other parts of the city code, and ordinances from other jurisdictions to get ideas for what we're going to submit. And then we plan to meet again in mid-March. So we'll be taking the commission's 2nd meeting slot for the month. I hope nobody else wanted to have a meeting. And I think that's it.
Does anybody have questions?
I do. What's the general time frame for this process of revising the code?
The steering committee has said they plan to get initial information out. What they're doing now is reviewing the code and to see what they want to change. And then they plan to put something out to the public in April for public input. And then, I don't know what the specific steps will be, but I think they're planning on it taking like a whole year to get it done. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'll chime in, Vicki, because I just got some more insight from Mr. Freese last week, not as a tree commissioner per se, but as a resident in a neighborhood association meeting. He was there and spoke to the Seville Plants Together process. And you're exactly right. The first step right now is what they're calling the diagnostic report. And then they're going to move to an approach report. And both of those things are what they will then take to the public in the spring. I don't think they're going to be actually proposing draft ordinance amendments or replacements at that first public engagement step. I think they're just going to be presenting like the diagnostic report, which is what's going wrong, what can we identify as things that need to change, and the approach report, which would, in an oversimplified way, probably be closer to what we've identified as like the goals or the concepts that we want to see addressed. So I think as long as we get our like 4 main goals fleshed out, and then all of the examples, the particular strategies of how to do that, you know, before they kind of finish their diagnostic and approach reports, we're either on target or ahead of the curve. It just sounds like we might also want to even provide almost like a preface to some of those things to say, well, here are the issues. I know in the annual reports and other presentations, we have images and we have notes and comments about, you know, anecdotes and examples of what's gone wrong. So that might be another thing we want to fold into our feedback to the CVille plans together, is the problems or the issues, plus our conceptual goals, plus the specific strategies or recommendations. But we do have time, it sounds like, to do all of that in the coming months.
See, Mark Rylander has his hand up.
I just, because the group's all together and because the topic of zoning and setbacks has come up a few times, and Jody mentioned something earlier, I wanted to encourage the committee to use the Streets That Work report for that specific side of your two-pronged approach. And I think in particular to, if the CVille Plans Together committee is given street sections, cross sections through typical streets that are actually what Charlottesville has, it would be really a useful starting point for these discussions, and moves things out of the kind of the realm of wish lists and advocacy towards, you know, if you had a street this wide, here is why this is why there's no room. And I'd be willing to kind of help thumb through that. Paul Josie is really familiar with Streets That Work. It's not really clear to me how that report it's not really part of the code. It's a reference document for the city. So it'd be great if some of the recommendations for streets of a certain size can get worked into the zoning code. And it would also be really good to have specific language, like a proposed zoning resolution that deals with, you know, what to do when a street right of way is so narrow that it won't allow trees. I'll stop at that.
All right. Brian Maynard has his hand up.
Yeah, we talked about this in committee, and I think it's just important for the whole commission. Sorry, for some reason, I think it's important for the whole commission to just have this in mind, that we're used to commenting on things. So we send a memo and it has, you know, information and sort of broad goals and all that. But when push gets to shove, this is really a legal exercise. Like the language, you know, we're gonna, and that's why Vicky was saying, it's important to have your upper level goals, but we can't really just, or even some examples, but we can't necessarily, to go to your last point, Mark, we can't necessarily say, so this is what we're thinking, you go off and write this or draft this. Because my experience, and I'm going to speak as a lawyer now, is that unless you have some control over the language, you will more often than not be surprised at what comes back to you. So if we see something that's particularly strong that we would like to have in the code, even if we have to borrow it from some other code, I think we need to go to the level of being very specific as to what the language should be in the code. And then that's a baseline. And then we can go back and forth in the stakeholder process. I just want to make sure that we don't sort of think that once we've given them our ideas, that somebody else is going to necessarily execute them for us. And it's really going to make this process more tedious in a way, and sort of more granular than I think anything the commission has done, certainly in a long time. I mean, I don't know if this is the right word, but I'm excited about it. I don't know if the rest of you are.
Only lawyer.
You know, we need to be really, really focused on that. And also a second point, just to back up, by way of introduction, since I just met him that night at the first meeting, Keith has two other things on his resume that I think are very interesting. One, he worked with Jim Urban on the downtown mall tree study. And he's worked with Jim through the years. So he's very familiar with our downtown mall trees, which is great. Because when we go into the mall canopy, mall study and all that, he would be a great resource for us. The second thing is he's gone through this process in other localities in Virginia and elsewhere. So I think he has a good strategic sort of mind as to how you approach this process and to understand how it works and to make sure that we're not waking up too late about something and realizing, well, certain decisions were made when we weren't at the table and now it's too late to go back. So I really do welcome his participation.
Thank you. Jody?
Just quickly, to put it on your all's radar as we go through this process of the zoning rewrite, the real wild card is utilities and the conflict between utilities and trees. And I just want to pay attention to what kind of regulations, requirements, the utilities department has for different utilities and their spacing from trees, and make sure that they're not any more generous in what they need to be. So it's just something to pay attention to. We can have as the best setbacks in the world, but if we got utilities running in the same place, we're not going to be able to plant trees there. So it's just something to pay attention to as we go through this process.
Right. Paul Josie, I know, brings that up a lot over the years as we've met with him. Vicki, I wanted to say that, I mean, this is so important, the zoning ordinance, as Brian says, it's money for trees and it's a better code. And so actually our next meeting's not till April 5th. So if you need to have another meeting in April before, because this is going to be a good chance to talk, because Public Works Director and the NDS Director are going to be at our next meeting. So if you, just to get your work done or get prepared for the April meeting, you could do another meeting in April too. I mean, our other committees can, can hold back. You have the larger committee, it's hard, some of the other committees are small, you can still meet 2 on 2. So those other committees can meet that way. But just know that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Is there any other questions? Sounds like we have a lot of work to do. And we're going to have a lot of help. That's great, with people who are volunteering to help us to do this. We're actually moving along pretty well. I guess, do we have any general public comments? Is Rami there?
Yes, if you'd like to speak to the tree commission at this time, you can press the raise hand icon in your Zoom webinar. If you're joining us via telephone, you can press *9. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes. Madam Chair, there are no hands raised at this time.
Okay. All right. 2 things I'd like to talk about. One, the applicants, we're going to have possibly 4 openings on the tree. I mean, we do have 4 openings on the tree commission. The date is March 11th to apply. March 22nd is when council will decide. To date, we have 7 applicants, and that's good. But I'm going to send out a link again to all of you to send out to anyone you think might be interested. Before, I think at one point we had 15 applicants one time, didn't we, Brian? It was, I think. So 7 is good, but we could use some more. A variety of people would be great, to have more diversity on our panel. We really love that. So if you think of anyone. So now comes the sad part of the meeting. We're going to have to say goodbye to Brian. Brian has been my mentor and confidant over the last 2 years. So, at the beginning, Brian, and that was basically sort of when COVID started. And Brian and I talked, and he said, I think Peggy, during my home term, two things are not going to happen. We're never going to meet in person, and we're not going to get the mall tree study done. So I said, don't worry, Brian, we're going to meet, we're going to get that Mall Street, we're going to get it done. I know we will. Sad to say, Brian was right. But he's been great. I think he never sleeps. I can text him in the middle of the night almost, and he'll respond to me. He's been great. He's a lawyer, but yet he writes in plain English, believe it or not. So he's been terrific doing that. So Brian, we have a little going away present for you. I'm going to have to come to your house and see you in person. But anyway, I don't know if you can see this.
Oh, it's beautiful.
But this is, the last time we made Paul Josie, guess what kind of wood it is? It's kind of interesting. It's a burl, and that's a defect on a tree. It's a mulberry.
Yeah.
And what's kind of interesting, if you look at the bottom, it's a perfect circle. But if you look this way, it's sort of an egg.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's beautiful.
So that's a token of our appreciation. I wish we could be together and have a toast and say, does anybody else want to make any comments about losing our lawyer here?
I'm glad you're not going far, Brian.
Yeah. I know. We've got him, his legal mind will help us with the codes. That's going to be great.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Brian, I'm glad you'll be around, and I really appreciate the clarity that you brought to some of our base documents, and just the clear way that you've led and organized meetings while you were chair. And so you're going to be missed.
And I said wonderful things about Paul Josie when he left, and I can't think of a better successor to Paul's work than what Brian has done. He has kept us on target, focused, well organized. The meetings have been run wonderfully. So thank you, Brian. You have continued to make this an even stronger organization. I can't even begin to tell you what this looked like 8 years ago, what the Tree Commission looked like 8 years ago. I am so impressed with the professionalism, the organization, and the direction and advocacy that the group has now. Thank you.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah, and adding to that, I think special attention drawing to the quality and the accessibility and relevance of the annual reports the last couple of years is a real highlight. And I think you should be commended for helping to lead the Tree Commission's efforts to make urban tree canopy issues about more than just the environment. I think that's critical, and you've done a great job helping to lead that. So 2 thumbs up.
The only problem with Brian, he's made this such a good organization that we have so much work to do. So, Jeff, we got a lot of work to do. So with that, I think we might be able to go home early tonight.
Well, I just want to thank you all for your fine comments. It really has been a group effort. I didn't want to be right about never meeting again in person, and I didn't want to be right about the canopy mall tree study. In a strange sort of way, I don't know what I'm going to do on every Tuesday, first Tuesday of the month. I'll turn my computer on. I will join you at some meetings. I'll take a month or 2 off and enjoy Tuesday night off, but I will join you. But it'll be odd when I turn my computer on and I don't see you all gathered. I look forward to meeting some of you for the first time. I've been with you on Zoom for a year or more, and we actually haven't sat down. So now with everything clearing up, I look forward to having a cup of coffee or a drink or a conversation with some of you, and reconnecting with others on the commission who I've worked with in the past, and doing so in person. I look forward to crossing paths with you about trees, but also about other things, because I know we have other interests. And as has been said a couple of times, I'm not going very far. I'm still a champion. You can call on me. I'll do the codes work. Peggy will make sure if I drift away, she'll pull me back. So, and I wish you all great success, and I will continue to cheer for you. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And happy Shrove Tuesday.
Yes.
Pancakes. Sorry.
Okay. Well,
Maybe we
that-
can meet you in the cemetery.
There you go.
Yes.
All right. Well, with that, I think we're done. And thank you all. We'll see you, if not before, next April 5th. So thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Good night.
I
Yeah.